let's jump into the end of the first packet, which is the booklet that starts with the word Hove, right? That's the heading. And it's page Nun Hey. So if you turn to the second to last page of that booklet, here we have page Nun Hey, and we're up to the last section in this chapter that's been speaking to us about the present, right? And about how to come into Hisbodedus with the consciousness of the present moment that we've been exploring for the past couple of weeks. And here he closes it out with a slightly different approach to the importance of the Hove of the present, and he has a slightly different spin on it. And let's explore what he says together. So the tzaddik says, Yesh lahavin es oimek hamusag hischabros el hahove. He says it's important to understand the depth of what we mean when we say connection to the present. She'ein inyana medubar rak al zman. We aren't only speaking about connecting to the time, right? So we're out of the past, we're not yet in the future, and we're in the time of the present. Hainu hisiyachtos, the oneness and the unification im ha'achshav, with the now, which is what we've been speaking about. Reveloi im esmal, and not being connected to the past. Oy ha'machar v'chiyotzabai, and not thinking about the future. That's also true. Ella, but now he wants to present another element of it, which is also included in the concept of Hove and connecting to the Hove. But in this context, it means the matziv of the Hove. It means present circumstances. So not simply literally living in the moment and experiencing fully, the fullness of what the person is experiencing then, but in terms of one's general life circumstance. So what does he mean? Kolomar, this means to say, Shebechol matzav sha'adam matzoi sham. Every circumstance and situation in life, alav lahavi al tocho es ha'or. The ideal is for a person to allow the light of Hashem to filter down into their life within their present circumstance. V'loy lizbar, and not for a person to think sha'ar hamadubar, that the light of emunah, or that the light of chizuk, or that the light of closest to Hashem, or that the light of meaning and elevation, etc., is kavanasa lamatzav acher. That a person shouldn't think that everything that we learn in the Sefarim about the import and the impact of what it means to really build a relationship with Hashem is talking about someone else at some other time, or maybe even ourselves, but at another time in our lives. In kavanasa lamatzav acher, to think that anything that we see in a sefer is not relevant to me now. Maybe it's relevant to someone else now, or maybe it's relevant to me at a different point in my life, but not now. Kavanasa lamatzav acher was talking about a different situation. Shahaya kfar, maybe I was once in that state. Oh yeah, epam, or sometime in the future I will be. So he says, let me give a parable to help us understand this a little bit more deeply. The Yuvan b'Yosar al pi mashal. He gives a parable lebachor to a student in yeshiva. Shibimei bacharusa shamadvar chizik midarshan. Maybe somebody came to the yeshiva or the seminary and gave a speech that was inspiring. V'kablam al toichan kelim shahaya matzui bahem ba'osa es. And his acceptance, his receiving of the words of whoever it was that spoke, was in light of the present details of his particular situation as a bacher in yeshiva, let's say at 16, 17 years old. Meaning it was a talk, let's say, I'm not getting angry, and in his present circumstance, it meant how to deal with roommates, or how to deal with waiting for the shower in the dorm, how to, and it came down into that kind of experience because that was his current circumstance. But imagine if la'achar mikein b'shanim la'achar nesuin, after he's married, he's not able to draw a link between the inspiration that he received as a bacher and apply it now to his present circumstances, because that was a shmuz relevant for me then and not for me now. So li'achar mikein b'shanim la'achar nesuin, years after marriage, lo matzah eitza b'nafshe v'shuv by l'shmaya, and then he remembers, back in the day, somebody came and gave a really powerful speech, and it might have even been recorded. And he goes back to listen to that speech. So imagine, He's hearing the very same words on the very same topic with the very same divrei Torah. But imagine he doesn't find it helpful. In the same way that they helped him in the past. Because in order for the words to impact, zakuk lishmaya atamichadash. He needs to enable himself or herself to listen to the words brand new. So that he can listen to them, not putting himself back in a situation that's no longer relevant. He's in his current situation, this is who he is now, but he's listening to the words in such a way that he brings them into his current circumstance and situation. So Nimtzad emerges shalo hityaches ala'ar. He wasn't really connecting to the light. Sharei achad hu ve'ein by shinoi me'az va'ad ata, because the message was the same message, nothing changed. The light itself was the light. Eles yaches al kli akibel. He was too connected to the external wrappings of it, trappings of it, the external vessel into which that light emerged and descended. And because he was too focused on the kli, right, with maybe the mishalim, that the darshan was giving to make it more relevant to the bachrim, that he wasn't really listening to the point, which is always true, which you can apply across the board. Misham hachi, therefore, b'shamai b'mei bachrus, when he hears this talk, let's say just in this parable, in the time of his youth, ta'al lisbar shiyafim hayadvarim raklein in bachrus. He makes the mistake of thinking, that was a shmuz for bachrim. That was a talk for younger people. That was a talk for people in this circumstance or that circumstance. It's not relevant to me now. So what's needed? So he's not able to make use of them that they should be useful for him in different times in his life. So what's the call of the hour? Is he needs to come to the realization that irrespective of the parables that were being given and whatever particular circumstances were being addressed, the message is the same. And the message needs to be applied to every moment of life, when a person's younger, when a person's a little bit older, and throughout a person's life. So and a person becomes clear that even if he should happen to encounter an experience and circumstance later in life that's totally different than where he's at now, let's say all of a sudden, persons in the first few years of marriage, maybe they're supported, and then after that they have to go into parnasa, right? And that causes all different issues. All different kinds of problems. The same thing. He's not going to be able to be wise enough to apply the message to this circumstance because he feels that it was only relevant for the past and not for the present. He's always looking for a new eitzah, to hear a new idea, right? Because the ideas that I heard previously were not relevant because I heard them as I was 10 years ago, which is totally not the case, because something that's true is always true. And that requires a little bit of a person sort of taking off the external, again, the sort of the way it showed up, to be able to really get to the point and allow it to apply to his or her circumstances. He needs to be able to apply that message to the present moment. Biram, however, if he was really always connected to the light, to the interiority, and he saw that here is an ultimate truth. This is a universal truth. It doesn't go away, and it's not just applicable to one situation or another. This is emes. If a person connects to light, so then it's always going to be relevant. And he's going to speak a lot more about this in the next chapter, which we'll probably get to today and start. It will apply identically across all different circumstances in the life. It makes no difference what's going on. He would constantly take whatever situation he's dealing with, and he would think, Ketzad nachona arha amiti gamal hashazais. How could these concepts apply to me in this moment now? So that he can make use of everything he ever heard of value and bring them into the current present moment. This is another way, because it's not exactly what we've been speaking about until now. This is another aspect of a living with the present. Hainu lichiyot im shleimus harayon im etzem ha'inyan. To live with the concept, but to bring it down into the current vessels. That just because our circumstances change, truth doesn't become less true. Right? This is sometimes what happens. A person can learn an inspiring idea, and it's inspiring for where they're currently at, and then something changes in their life, and they're not in the same mood, they're not as connected, they're not as clear in their head, they're not feeling the same cheshek, and it's like, oh, it's not relevant anymore. And usually it's on the contrary. Usually there's no more relevant moment for words of emunah, for words of connection, and it's this weird thing where it's like, yeah, if I'm feeling spiritually connected, then words of inspiration work, and if I'm not, then they don't. And it's like, when did we think they were for? That's dafka when they're for, is to find a way to apply them to the present. That's what he says. It means lichyos imahove. La ha'ir achtas ha'pashot, in the words of Rabbi Nachman in Torah Beis and Likutei Moharan, Tinyana, to be able to allow the singular light, achdas ha'pashot, to illuminate bepu'ulais mishtanis, to illuminate various circumstances, and each time it'll mean something else. And each time, because a person believes in the R, they'll go back to it and they'll learn it again at a different stage in life, and it will hit differently because now it's different. It's coming down into a different vessel, but it's the same light. And all the time the person is thinking, how is this relevant to me now? And then next week, how is it relevant to me then? Right? Meaning not then, meaning in the now. And all the time living with the present moment. Without thinking that a person needs something else, a different light. And a person goes hopping around from one thing to another thing. It's not how it should be. A person should be wary, even in our own spiritual growth, if we find ourselves doing that. If something's not. If we connect to the MS, then hold on to it. I was just speaking to somebody earlier. Some people, this is how it is. They go from sefer to sefer, book to book. They read a few pages here, a few pages there. And really all a person really ever needs is just one true thing. And they could hold on to that, and they could really, really apply it throughout life, and that's it. But in order to do that, we have to connect to the Or itself and have emunah, which is going to be the next paragraph, that it's always relevant no matter what. Because a true thing is always true, always relevant. And to find a way to live with the present, how am I going to bring that down into my own circumstances? So let's turn over the page, and Yair is going to give the ultimate example. This is just all a preparation and an introduction. And here he says, for example, everything that we've learned in the sefer until now, which is, we're up to 56 pages already, so we've done quite a bit. Let's say a person heard the first 20 however many shiurim of this series, and it's all about how we're so valuable to Hashem, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu waits. And when we come to Hisbodedus, Hashem says, Tov Shabbat, right? Or Tov Shabbat, how wonderful it is that you came, and I love hanging out with you and keep Hashem company, and the equality between this, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu trusts us, all the things that we learned about. So, Im mechubar al metzias ha'emes al hadavar, if a person connects to that truth, Yodeya, then he has to know Shahadvarim Amurim Klape Kol Ish Yisrael, that applies to every single Jewish person, Pshutai Kamashmai, in the most literal sense. There's no conditions. It applies to each and every person in their circumstance. Ve'ina zakak lishmaya zois mechadash, right? Midei boyal noichach Yehudi amatzu le'aleinu betachtas hadarga v'shafal amatzev. And if a person should descend, and a person should stumble, and a person should have a dark day and a difficult week, they don't need to go looking for like a different sefer, to pitch it in a different way. Like, it's the same thing. Because it's true, it's always true. Our avoda is to bring it down into our own experience. Leida ha'im gamalav amurim hadvarim. That a person should think, like, was it really talking about me? even now, I know it was maybe talking about me yesterday, but today is a whole different world. And a person has to know, Elakol Yehudi ba'asher hu sham. Every Jew, no matter what's going on in their life, they need to be able to bring the light of this truth into their hoveh, into their present moment. And each time they're going to come to Hisbodedus, and they're going to be going through what they're going through at that particular day or that particular moment in life, and they're going to have to find a way to connect to this truth out of their present matziv. And not to think, oh, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, if only I can get back to a place where I perceived it to be relevant given my circumstances then. It's still relevant. How do I find a way to connect to this light out of my current situation? And that means that every single time the idea and the concept and the experience will reflect differently. And that's the wondrous totality of a true idea that's able to unfold bit by bit throughout a person's life. So he says this is true for everyone. Elakol Yehudi ba'asher hu sham. Every Jew, no matter where that person is, he's not speaking physically, he's speaking spiritually, emotionally, whatever a person's going through, no matter what. We have to be able to live in the present, meaning to awaken the truth of this reality, no matter what I'm going through. And here he quotes L'sfas emes, Ki ahavas hamakom baruch hu l'bnei Yisrael. Listen to these words, incredible. He says the love of HaKadosh Baruch Hu for each and every Jew, Gam kein eina tluya b'davar. It doesn't depend on anything, af lo b'masehem, and it does not depend on their actions. Rak bachar lo chelik Hashem amo. HaKadosh Baruch Hu chose Klal Yisrael as his treasured people. That's it. He looks after us. We're bound up with him. Our destiny is his destiny. And that's what the pasuk says, Ahavti eschem. I have loved you, Hashem says to Klal Yisrael. And if Klal Yisrael are going to ask, how could it be that you love us? Esav and Yaakov were twins. They were the same. They grew up in the same household. Why would you choose one over the other? And HaKadosh Baruch Hu says even so. Pirish she'ein tam. You're right. Hashem says to Klal Yisrael, and I wrote about this, I think it was this year, Tishrei, I put out What is a Jew, like Kuntras, and spoke about this idea then. Hashem says, you're right. There is no difference between Esav and Yaakov. That's the sod of the goats, right? The seir la'azazel and the seir la'Hashem, where they both have to be identical goats, right? And they're reflective of this twin identical nature between Yaakov and Esav. And one is la'azazel and one is la'Hashem, and we don't know why, and it's a gorel, right? It's the gorel means that there's no cognitive clarity with regard to why this one is la'Hashem and this one is la'azazel. It's up to Hashem. It's something it's called lemala mitam vadas. It's beyond our brain. It's not a cognitive thing, right? It's not deserving. There's nothing upon which to condition the love. This is a truth that each and every one of us is bound up with HaKadosh Baruch Hu at our root and our core. So for example, Amura emes zu. This particular teaching, imagine a person who reads this teaching when they're really doing well and they're davening properly and they're being kind and they're working on their midos and they feel emunah and they have bitachon and they're overcoming their challenges. Imagine a person's in that situation, they read this L'sfas emes. And then 2 months later, everything falls apart, which happens. That's life, chas v'shalom, but it happened. And all of a sudden, they run into challenges. And then they look back at this L'sfas emes. They say, no, that was then. That was a teaching for then. But he didn't mean me, now. Says Rav Kluger, living in the achshav means that the now becomes a portal through which to view everything of meaning of the past, and it comes into our lives in a new way. But truth is truth always, forever. So he says, "V'kach amura emes zu l'chol matzav she'ish Yisrael nikla sham l'sham." No matter which situation, a Jew is like a slingshot, like a kela, right, is slung into this matzav. This is always true. And the question is, how do I relate to this truth on this particular Monday? How am I going to relate to the truth on Thursday? How am I going to relate to the truth in a year from now? But the truth is true. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu puts us through what He puts us through because He wants that these truths should be developed. He wants them to come down through the lenses of all of our particular circumstances that are constantly changing, so that the Or of Achdus, which is the light of Emes, can have its full manifold expression. Like the very word Emes, which you've spoken about probably in the past, is a conjugation of the whole entire Aleph base, right? So Aleph is the first letter, Taf is the last, Mem is the middle. Emes. Emes has to be extended throughout the whole entire system. We are the system. All of us individually, and each of the moments and circumstances and dynamics of our lives as things unfold, we are the vessels through which those eternal truths are shining. And if a Jew makes the mistake to think that this is true then, but not now, they're missing the boat, because all true Torah is relevant 100% of the time. The question is, how? And we're going to learn about that, as Hashem, in the next chapter. We'll begin in a few minutes. The question is, how? And that's the work, right? So the work is not to try to find something relevant. The truth is to take what's relevant always and to figure out, so what is the implication of this for my circumstance? And that's a very special thing. Because the way in which a Jew is connecting to the essential bond between them and Hashem when they're 15 is going to be different, to when they're connecting in their 20s and in their 30s. A decade is a long enough period of time. And 40s and 50s and 60s. And, my mother became a great grandmother, last week, and I became a great uncle. It's a different stage of life, like a great grandmother. And this truth is just as true for her now as it was for her when she was a teenager, and when she and Nebuch lost, both her parents by the time she was 18. It was true then in that way, and now it's true for her in this way. And that's her life. And all of us go through our own circumstances, but the truths, they're eternal. I'm just reminded of something the Chavetz Chaim once said. He was once heard talking to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And he says, Master of heaven and earth, he says, in a year from now, things will be different. In 10 years from now, things will be very different. In a year from now, things will be more different. In a decade, I did a decade. In 10 years from now, right? In 50 years from now, in 100 years from now, the world, you couldn't have maybe imagined with Ruach HaKodesh, maybe you saw it, but how the world changes, and you can't imagine, right? In 2,000 years, the world is unrecognizable in millions of ways. But the Chavetz Chaim said to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, he said, I want you to know that although everything will change in a year, and in 10 years, and in 100 years, and in 1,000 years, and in 2,000 years, he said, Master of heaven and earth, in a year from now, my neshama will be yours, will be with you. In 10 years from now, my neshama will be with you. In 100 years from now, my neshama will be with you. In 1,000 years from now, my neshama will be with you, etc., etc., etc. For all infinity. The truths of the Torah, which are coming down to us through the tzaddikim in various forms, are eternally true. The question is, how do I relate to them today, and how will I relate to them tomorrow when that's tomorrow's today? Achshav. V'kach oimra emes zu, amura emes zu l'chol matzav, she'ish mi Yisrael nekla l'sham. No matter where a Jew is cast, we're on page Nun Vav. It's the last page of the first booklet. No matter what a person's going through, laha'ir, our job is to illuminate b'bihirus, with clarity. Shegam ala matzav hazeh hischavnu hadvar maksuvim b'svar makdoshim. Everything that's written in the entire Sfas Emes, everything that's written in the entire Tanya and the entire Likutei Moharan and so on and so forth is relevant to every single Jew, every single minute of their life. The question is how? And how are these true ideas going to come down through the lens of this moment and then through the lens of that moment? Gam ala shah azois, even in this moment. L'zois yikari es chabras hamitas lahove. That's also what it means to connect to the present. That I don't need to get out of my circumstance in order for the whole Torah to be true, because the Torah is true now. Because like we've said many times in the past, B'shvili nivra olam, that each and every Jew needs to be able to say the whole world was created for me. And like I like to say, not me on Yom Kippur on my highest moment. Me now, today. Because that's all there is. That's the only reality that there is. All of us know that. Like we said, yesterday is gone, tomorrow isn't yet. This is reality. And imagine for each person to say it was worth everything to be brought about for this moment of my experience in Olam Hazeh as I am now. That's embracing the moment. And not falling into the illusion that there are some ideas that I'll have to wait until they're all true. Because now is all there is. So how do I relate to all these ideas in the present? This is what it really means to connect to the present. It's connecting to the truth and the understanding that the Torah is coming down into all of our lives as we are. And I think this is reflected. We're coming up to Shavuos now. I think it's reflected in a very deep way in the whole dynamic of Har Sinai, where the pasuk tells us, "Vayered Hashem al Har Sinai." Hakadosh Baruch Hu descends onto the mountain, right? Which is a strange thing because Hashem can't descend. Hashem is everywhere. Hashem doesn't exist in spatial reality. What does that mean? Hashem descended. It has many meanings. One of the meanings is, which you can really see in the contrast between Parshas Yisro and Parshas Mishpatim, that a lot of the tzaddikim speak about, where Parshas Yisro is all about the most ecstatic, visions. It was the most glorious moment in history, and the lightning, and the sky opens up, and Torah comes down, and Hashem. And you turn like 2 pages in the Torah, and you're in Parshas Mishpatim, where we're talking about people hurting each other, damaging, breaking things, people who are in a fight, and all, the laws about like what happened? How does this Torah that's just this sparkling infinite light, the Raza, the Chachmas of the secret of Hashem's revelation of the deepest wisdom, and all of a sudden you fall into Parshas Mishpatim? And the answer is, this is the greatness of Torah. A lot of other spiritual traditions, lahavdil, you read the books and they're speaking about, super lofty things, deep meditations and deep, and maybe they're relevant for some people who are on the level. But there's like a whole huge swath of humanity that it's just not relevant for, because humans deal with humanity. To be human is a difficult thing. Angels have it very easy. Human beings, it's not simple. And there are challenges, and there are difficulties, and there are, jagged edges to the human experience, and things aren't so smooth all the time. Vayered Hashem al Har Sinai could mean that HaKadosh Baruch Hu, in giving the Torah, comes down into our situation. Like the Torah comes down to settle into every vessel that we experience, unfolding in our lives, that is created for this light of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And maybe this is also the secret of this, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu warns Klal Yisrael to stay behind the fence and not to rise up. The Berditchev Rav, I said this recently in a shiur, maybe Shabbos afternoon I mentioned, the Kedushas Levi asks, why is it that in the Torah, Shavuos is called Atzeres? We call it Shavuos, but in the Torah it's called Atzeres. And he also asks, what is the mitzvah of Shavuos? All of the other Yamim Tovim have their mitzvah, and it's very, very clear. Right? Pesach is Matzah Marar, and a Dalet Kosos, and in Purim at least, we have 4 mitzvahs a yom, Matanas Lavyonim, and Shalach Manas, and drinking, and reading the Megillah, etc., etc., etc. What is the mitzvah of Shavuos? Okay, we read Megillas Rus, right? Obviously, we eat dairy. There are different minhagim associated with it. What is the mitzvah? What's the avodah on Shavuos? Says the Berditchever, go back to the first Shavuos. What was the mitzvah then? Klal Yisrael only had one mitzvah, and then they got the 10 Commandments, so the whole Torah folded into it. What was the mitzvah? To stay behind, To stay behind the boundary. That was the only thing that HaKadosh Baruch Hu told Klal Yisrael. On the day of Kabbalas HaTorah, stay where you are. Says the Berditchever, this is the mitzvah of Shavuos. Listen to how deep this is. Because a person might think that if HaKadosh Baruch Hu is revealing Torah min Hashemayim, I have to run up the mountain. And Hashem says, Vayered Hashem al Har Sinai. The Torah is coming to you. You stay where you are. Shvu ish tachtav. Every person needs to be where they are and not fall for the illusion that in order to access Torah you have to go somewhere else. Like the Psakim say very clearly in Devarim, Lo rechaikehi mimcha, right? Le me'ever hayam, that the Torah is not distant. Ki karaiv elecha davar ma'id. And that's true always. That a person is never in a situation where the Torah is not relevant, that in order for it to be relevant, they have to make a fundamental shift in their life. It's not true. They might have to make shifts in their life, and that will be true for tomorrow, and that will be true for next week. But right now, in this moment, the Torah has what to say to every single Jew in the world. So it's like an amazing thing, the dynamic. Hashem says, stay there, and Vayered Hashem al Har Sinai, and I'm coming down to you. Says the B'ditchever, that's why Shavuos is called Atzeres. Atzeres means like a gathering, because it's referring to bringing in the crops, right? It's the time of the year that we reap, all the crops, and we gather them in. And that's why we read Rus on Shavuos. It was around this time of year, right? The gathering in of the stalks. But the word Atzeres could also have the connotation to be held back from something. Liyot ne'etzar, right? Means atzor, means stop. So the Riddichever says, it turns out that the whole mitzvah of Shavuos, if we want to receive the Torah, is stop. Stay where you are. Don't try to change the situation fundamentally, driven by the illusion that if only I can change fundamental aspects of my circumstance, then I'll be able to connect to Hashem. Hashem says no. The mitzvah, he says, not just a nice thing, the mitzvah of Shavuos, like the whole prerequisite for Kabbalas Torah, is to stay where you are with acceptance. Tamim tia im Hashem Elokecha. Tamim tia, right? Like he learned from Rashi, not to be doresh asidos, right? And he interpreted it, we learned last time we learned, not to try to go jumping into the future, that we should have a fundamental change in circumstance. That's not tamim, and it's not for nothing that the Torah is associated with tamimus. Yaakov Avinu is called Yaakov Ish Tam. He was a tamim. Yoshev Ohalim. He stayed in his tent. Chazal Darshan, whose tents? It says tents, right? And Shem Ve'ever, whatever it was, who he was learning from, or it means Avram and Yitzchak, right? He was a student of both his father and his grandfather. And he learned from Yitzchak the importance of boundaries, Gevura, and he learned from Avram Avinu, which is usually the way it is with parents and grandparents, So he learned from Avram Avinu Chesed and what it means to be showered with gifts, and he balanced them both in Tiferes. He was Ish Tam, Yoshev Ahalim. But the words Yoshev Ahalim also connotate this aspect of Kabbalas Torah, to stay where one is. Yoshev Ahalim. Not to be running around all the time. To fully embrace the now, and to, on the contrary, not try to change things, to see it as an imperative to connect to Torah through our current moment, because that's how Hashem wants it. And there and only there can I have the true Kabbalas Torah that's shaykh for me right now. Amazing thing. Amazing thing. Okay, let's turn to the second booklet here. Yeah.
Could it be that some aspects of Torah are more applicable in some times than others? For example, as a shiur, you need to know when to apply those and what circumstances. And a lot of the time, someone doesn't have the kelim to be able to know how to apply the Torah to their current circumstances, and it can actually be damaging.
It's true. That's why a person needs a Rav. A person needs somebody to talk to. Someone who understands this Torah. Somebody who understands how to enable that person to connect. Obviously, a person is not expected to learn Kol Torah Kula every minute and apply it to that minute, right? But it means if there are certain ideas that a person has the sense that they are not worthy of, that's never true. And the question is, and that's what he's really speaking about, teachings like those. Otherwise, what's not relevant? What's not applicable? It's all applicable. He's speaking about ideas that a person has about their relationship with Hashem that might have been true last week, but are no longer true this week, and that is never ever true. And a person has to be guided, right, or be connected to Sfarim that will enable them to sort of self-guide in a way where, on the contrary, this new circumstance deepens the reality of the connection, which we're now going to learn very much about as we move forward. Yeah.
I think jumping onto the question of insinuation, sometimes it might be different halachim talk to you more different sefer, and it could be it's deepening the truth that you already know.
Yeah, exactly.
Or it's just a different angle because you're able to hear it.
Video. That's exactly, yeah.
It could be some different sefer and change it.
It can be. But I think what he's saying is the idea that there are certain truths that stop being true because the circumstance shifts cannot be true, right? Because these two things cannot exist at once, right? A truth doesn't change. That's what emes means. The definition of emes is that it's eternal. Svas emes, the pasuk says, tikon la'ad. A true thing lasts forever. V'nasan lanu Torahs emes, right? V'chaye olam nata b'secheni. Truth always goes together with eternity. Kushtakoi, right? The Gemara in Shabbos says, truth stands. Shikr, like, it's only something that's sheker, that's only true then and not true now. So, in a Hanami, certainly the person, as they go through life, will need certain ideas. Other ideas are less relevant. Nachon. But if a person should ever fall into a way of thinking that there were really beautiful ideas, there were really, like, inspiring and motivating ideas, that because of their current circumstances, it's no longer true, says Rav Kluger, no. Embrace the present and allow that light to come down to where you are. Vayered Hashem al Har Sinai, with you not making one change and moving up the mountain, God says, stay where you are. Stay who you are. Stay with your situation and embrace it and come to the realization that not only can't things be different, they were never ever supposed to be different than they currently are. Because this is how things are. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is a kel amuna ein avel. Hatsur tamim pa'ala. HaKadosh Baruch Hu does everything. Everything's already complete. Yismach Hashem b'masav. Hashem takes pride in His creatures as they are. What does He ask? From that place, we should connect Him. That's it. That's the only thing that we're asked to do. From where we are to connect Him. The belief of the tzaddikim is that when a person can get into this mindset, they will change. Tomorrow will be different. They'll take a step upward. They're going to be compelled to grow. But the relationship is first. Yeah, we had a question?
I just wanted to check with that whole part that you just said about Har Sinai content, that all Talmud literature.
No, that's my own idea. Yeah. The Berditchever says that Seres bit, right? But I'm connecting to the Vayered Hashem al Har Sinai, and you have to see how he says it over there. But take a look in Drushim L'Shavuos. It's translated on Safari. If you need the English, you can see. Yeah, question?
No, I think you want to say because they have to change eventually, but just staying.
No, right. So that's the whole thing. That's the whole thing, is that when a person has this relationship of acceptance, so then you start to feel a bit yucky if you could change and don't, because then you're getting empowered the whole time. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is infusing us with love and telling us we're a soul and teaching us how holy we are, so then we feel compelled to manifest that. That's the Baal Shem Tov's approach, that we begin with that, and that motivates. As opposed to telling a person that where they're at now is nothing special, but if they work really hard, then they'll eventually, it's a completely different approach. This was the approach of the Baal Shem Tov. Okay, let's see more about this now. Let's jump in. Here we're on page Nun Zayin. And we begin a new chapter. This is a remarkable, remarkable chapter. All of them are, but this is something special. And the heading of the chapter is Oifen HaKamas Kesher Pnimi V'chitzoni. The methodology of creating both an inner bond as well as an outer bond. And I'm very grateful that he did not put any full stops in the sentence, because the grammar here irked me very much. I'm sure you also. Right? He puts a period over here and he doesn't put another period at the end. Anyway, I don't know who's arranging his stuff. But over here there's no periods. I could breathe easy. Okay. Says the tzaddik like this. He gives a mashal, a parable, to two people who are very close to each other, and their libam mu'uchad, their hearts are really unified, be'emes, like in the truest way, and with a lot of love. Ach, however, la'echad mishneim yesh eze inin ba'anagasa she'enim misyasho alev atzad hasheni. One of them has a certain habit, a certain mannerism, a certain, inyan, that a mafriyas hakesher. It bothers the other person. Not the end of the world, but it bothers the other person. Everybody has their quirk. Everybody has their blind spot. all of us. And it can bother the other person. He says, even if this thing is totally external, it's not important thing, it's a small thing, it's not. And it doesn't detract an iota from the relationship. And this is like, I think every marriage is like this, and every close friendship is like this. You know, you have that friend, you love them to pieces, but they chew with their mouth open. Okay, it's not gonna. So what are you gonna do? It's not gonna split up the friendship, but it's an outside thing, you know. But the bond is there. However, he says, if there's a gentle way where you can bring this up. You know, that particular one is a really hard one. You know, it's not pleasant. But if there's a way to bring up, you know, the aspect that needs fixing, so that's ideal, right? At the end of the day, it causes a little bit of a separation and a frustration and an annoyance. And if that was resolved, it would be easier. Okay. Vihine. When they find a way to resolve this aspect and this issue, take of bahakol tikunai. So immediately everything is 1,000,000 times more rectified. Ki yish kan yisoid bari, and the reason is because there was already a healthy foundation. The eitan lekesher, and there was a mighty bond. Hu Penimiyus, which means that interior, right? The interior connection was very strong. So there are external things, but they'll get resolved because the inner bond is strong. Ki b'chol kasher imazulas, he makes this very important foundation. In every single relationship with someone else, yish beis dargos. There are always 2 layers of the connection. Aleph, the first, it's called Penimiyus-Centered. Right, that's the interiority of the bond. That's the inside of the connection. And Beis is chitzoniyus. And the second layer is the external aspects of the connection. And the goal in a relationship is that both should be functioning properly. And to build up that essential internal bond until, because of the overwhelming respect and love that these two people have for one another, so if it should be brought to either of their attention that something that they're doing or not doing is bothering the other, for sure they want to fix it. Now, imis askim rak bechitzoniyus hakesher ve'ein dagesh ala penimiyus azaya ikar chaser. Imagine if you have a relationship where there's actually no internal connection, and all there is an external connection, which usually the definition and the lens is one of selfishness, right? Because then why do they have a relationship? Because it's utilitarian, right? Each one wants something from the other one, and so that keeps the connection together. But there's no bond. That's usually the result of giving as opposed to taking, right? Which is selfless, which means that I melt into the space right between us, where you are melted into that space, and in that place there's an union of oneness, right? Which is not possible when I am just taking and the other one is just taking. Then there's no oneness. Then each one is sort of standing in opposition to the other. But when there's giving, then there's an open channel. But imagine if you have a relationship which is only b'chitzoniyus, ve'ein dagesh ala penimiyus, and there's no stress at the internal bond. So he says, azaya ikar chaser. So that means that the ultimate foundation of a relationship is missing. V'ubechinas, what that really means is ava hatliya b'davar d'seifa b'tela. It's only conditional love, right? Conditioned on what the person thinks that they're getting out of the relationship, and if they no longer feel like they're getting it, there's no relationship. D'seifa b'tela, like Chazal say, eventually the condition falls away, and then the love falls away, and that's just the way it is. Afilu trunia kala alula l'chaloisa, and if that's the dynamic and the nature of the relationship, then even the smallest thing could knock it off. Because the minute that it becomes not worth it anymore, so then the thing is finished because there was no real connection. And it's not a judgment of whether it's good or bad; it's just a fact. Some relationships are not meant to work out, not because it's not because anybody did something wrong. It's just there was no soul bond, and that's that. And if there is a soul bond, mashu acher. Achim yesh dagesh ala ikr, but if in that relationship there is a focus on the essence, and we make the main thing, and then we carefully build up the interior bond as is fitting, as is proper, then then it might take years, it might take some time, but eventually the outside of the bond will be absolutely, totally one. And we will have both in the relationship stuck around long enough to be able to fix up the other things without allowing the other things to destroy the kesher, which was only illusory at the outset. So the minute that fractures appear on the surface, there was nothing other than surface from the beginning. So there's nothing there. But if there's a strong, dense core, so then the fractures on the outside, they're external fractures, because the thing wasn't hollow. If the thing is hollow, the whole thing falls apart. And that's the aspect of the soul of the relationship and the body of the relationship. Now he says, when we talk about externality, there are two layers even within the aspect of external. There are people who have a relationship of the outside of the outside. Hainu, which means, for example, give a mashal, derech mashal ben ish l'ishtai, husband and wife, for example, imagine that the husband likes sweet food, and she likes salty food. So he says, right? This is a totally external thing. It has nothing to do with their relationship. It really has nothing to do with themselves. This is just a side thing. He likes chocolate, she likes vanilla. Okay. Right? And we can understand that in the home, because she's a really loving and caring wife, he likes sweet food, she makes sweet food. If they happen to be in a place that has lots of other foods, or at home when he's not around for the meal or whatever it is, because she likes the salty food, and that's just the way it is. So that's what he would call chitzoniyus to chitzoniyus. It's the outside of the outside, has no bearing on the real connection between them. Now, there is a layer that's a little bit more interior. It's still external, but it's a little bit deeper. Kegoyin, for example, hahevdel bikisharon, which means the difference between them in their nature. Right? That's a deeper thing. It still doesn't relate to the actual bond and the connection between them. A little bit deeper, because it's not just about flavors of ice cream. Now it's about personalities. They're different. Sha'ish, for example, the male in the relationship, yosech harifu mufupal. He's always in his head, and he's always thinking, and is very deep, and he's very analytical. And her talents and her energy is very simple, and is very easygoing. So what's going to happen? How could these two come together? It's not just flavors of ice cream, which it's one thing. These are two different personalities. Says Rav Kluger, they are still considered inyanim chitzoniyim, external elements, with regard to, in relation to, beram kesher pnimi, to the interior bond, which he calls hinasiyas achin, which is something that goes beyond that, which is really difficult to put into words. It just happens. Where there's just a sensation, like Reb Tzadok HaKohen would say, that it isn't that a husband was dating a woman, or a man, let's say, was dating a woman, and he loved her, and therefore he married her. Reb Tzadok HaKohen, drawing on the reverse, very paradoxical perspective of his Rebbe, the Ishbitzer, says, no, it was because you were going to marry her that you loved her. Because our souls are already attuned to the future. So he says it's not, because in a very pragmatic sense, no, it works the opposite way, right? The person falls in love and then you marry. No, Rabbi Tzaddik says, when you by Hashem, the whole future is already there. So it must be that the neshama already sensed all the children that they would, bring into the world together, and the neshama already sensed decades and decades of living to, and the neshama felt that, and that's what very deep. But there's an asiyas chen. Even though their personalities are different, when there's an asiyas chen, when there's a bond there, a kesher pnimi, v'kasher kayam, it'll figure itself out. On the contrary, usually differences, again, providing that there's a strong foundation, the differences will be complementary, as he's going to express. Therefore, with regard to the parable that we said earlier, because in the relationship the Penimiyus is there, which is the nesiyas chen that goes beyond any condition, which isn't about any inyanim chitzoniyim, not having the same flavor ice cream as the other, and not even having the same personality as the other, but there's something deeper there. Eventually, the external things will align, and they'll stop getting on each other's nerves, and over the years, they'll bring up gently this, and he'll bring up gently that, and she'll say this, and he'll say that, and usually it happens at the same time, so she'll bring up, something thing, and he'll say, oh yeah, but, and then once we're on the topic, here's this thing that but it doesn't cause a crisis, because it's in the context of a strong kesher. And then with time, things iron themselves out. Like a woman who has trouble with one aspect of keeping house. And that's the arrangement between them. She's supposed to be at home, taking care of the house, and he's supposed to be out at work. Let's say that's the setup that they have. And the husband, this is something that he really cares about. And she, figure it out. She can't... the challahs, she just can't figure out how to make challah. Whatever, a small thing, and it's something that he cares very much about. He grew up in his house, and the whole time he's talking about his mother's challahs and the smell of the baking challahs, Erev Shabbos. This is a thing that he always dreamed of and wanted, and she can't figure the thing out. Says Reb Kluger, again, it's just an example. Shem yesh beinehem kesher pnimi ha'im al tiloi. If that essential interior bond, and these are all mashalim, you understand? So it's a good sefer for relationships in general, but it's all going to be speaking about Hashem and us, right? That's where he's going to get. Now he's speaking about marriage, but it's not really about that. It's about that too. If the kesher pnimi between them is strong, yesh biyadam limtzei pitaron la'osei in study ubzenasa kol miyushav. They will for sure figure out a solution, a resolution. The resolution, by the way, might be him being mevater, and him just saying, okay, I guess it's not as important as I thought it was, and he'll get over his illusion and whatever. Or they'll figure something else out. She has a trouble cleaning. Okay, they'll hire a person to do the whatever it is. They'll figure it out, but it's not that's not a make it or break it, because the relationship was never about that in the first place. Everything will heal. And thereby, that our Penimi that's eternal, that's always there, will find a way to filter out into the external layers of the relationship. Keep shita, because it's obvious, right? Because relationships don't work that way. I mean, sometimes they do, but generally speaking, relationships like that, it doesn't start from the outside and work its way in. And that's why it generally works. Dating and marriage is like, first there's the testing out to see whether there's this soul bond, this spark, the chemistry. And then when there's a connection, so then you build on that. I know that sometimes, there's wisdom, like sometimes the opposite, that you don't have to feel it. I don't know. I don't know about that personally. For me, I think that's crucially important. I don't think that a person should be signing their life away, forever and ever, if their neshama isn't screaming that this is right. And then on paper it ticks all the boxes, and then maybe they'll feel the chemistry at some later point. I don't know. Could be it's possible. I've seen many times where it's not possible. So what matters first is to feel. We'll get to the question in a minute. What matters first is to feel something. What that thing is very difficult to put your finger on. It's beyond words. Very difficult to describe. But a person knows. And like I said, there's a soul resonance. And this Reb Tzaddik puts a little bit more color into it, where like there's a part of an neshama that's listening out. Can you hear echoes coming from the future? Can you hear? And again, it's not a sichli thing. It's not a rational thing at all. And sometimes you have a situation where all the boxes are ticked and you don't feel that. And sometimes you have a situation where a lot of the boxes are not ticked and you do feel that. Could be. But his premise is that if we begin with a strong kesher pnimi, and that both partners in the relationship foster that kesher pnimi, and they do so verbally, and they speak this out, and they make commitments to one another, and they learn the language of what it means to be experiencing love, then there's a strong foundation that will prevail. If not, again, it's not a judgment call. It's not saying good or bad. Just saying a fact. Sometimes it doesn't happen. And that's just the way it is. That's also min hashamayim. And a person it could be a person has many zivugim. And sometimes we don't know gilgulim things. Sometimes it was important for a zivug to be together for a bit of time. I tell this kaseder how many broken engagements people have all the time. So many people. I could count a mamish, more than one finger, more than one hand, just recently. And part of the chizuk is, and it's true for divorce as well, this was also a tikkun. Nothing goes to waste. Obviously, min hashamayim, this soul needed to be with this soul for the time that they were together, and whatever needed to be accomplished was accomplished. And that's that. But for it to be the aspect of ish v'isha zacha shchina shrei b'neihem, it's important to have this, what he calls the kesher pnimi. So he says, but to start from the outside, where there's like let's say there's no common ground, so, because it's like an arranged marriage, let's say in like very extreme Hasidic circles, and they meet each other once, and their parents decide that this is the right thing, even though I know that they say the divorce rates are very low and whatever it is, but I don't know how healthy those marriages. I don't know. Again, I'm not making a comment one way or another. I don't know. I just don't know. And it could be that it's my westernized brain, and they would tell me, it's been working for generations. Has it been working for generations? Like, are those healthy homes? Are those healthy children? It could be yeah, it could be not. There's probably evidence for both. But when there is a kesher pnimi, when there's a bond, then something else. But he says if it only the chitzoniyus ve'eini side b'chlal haskell by kol zman she'ein miyusad heitev hakesher hapnimi. If there was no inner bond, so then it can't be. Therefore, and this will finish for tonight. Seder hadvarim, what needs to happen is la'avoid ala kesher hapnimi, is that first let there be this internal bond. And Bali Tshuva come, and we don't speak to them about Hashem, and we just tell them we got to do this, that, and the other thing, and we throw them right into Torah and mitzvahs without allowing them to develop a kesher pnimi with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It goes as quickly as it came. It goes as quickly as it came. What is first and foremost important is that a person builds a relationship, because we have to bring it all back, because that's what the sefer is about, into our relationship with Hashem. Not just in a generic sense, relationship with Hashem. This is very deep. It's a sugya. We're learning a sugya now. What does it mean, a relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu? When there's a strong kesher, then when the person is in yeshiva, when they leave yeshiva, when they're in this circumstance, the other circumstance, nothing changes. Because the kesher pnimi was there, and that enables them to connect to the achshav, or no matter what they're going through, the truth is the truth is the truth, and it's there forever. So this lavad al kesher hapnimi is to work on that internal bond. And then slowly but surely, and this was your question before, right? Eventually, it will emerge and it will have an impact on a person's. Because who doesn't want to, do more mitzvahs? When they have a kesher panimi with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and they recognize that a mitzvah is another opportunity to bring that light into my life that makes me feel whole, that makes me feel supported. We have to have a healthy perspective of God. Otherwise, I'll run in the other direction, right? So, but it has to be a kesher panimi. Then it will emerge in the kesher chitzoni. Li'achar mikein be'efsharos lahamshich lehetiv gam es hachitzoniyus hashayna. And then a person will work on all these other things. Shehem yushav alev hatzad hasheni. And that's the way it works in relationships with friends, in marriages, and ultimately in our relationships. Ani haben v'ata ha'av sheli shekol kach ohev oti ha'av sheli melech chai v'kaya al kol neshima she'ani